People don't realize how movies affect people. And I'd ask guys, they robbed a bank. I said, "Oh man, where'd you learn that?" "Oh, I watched a movie. I watched them rob a bank." And you're influenced by it. And I was also influenced by guys like Zorro. Zorro was a cool guy, and handsome and all, but he wore a mask. And then I was influenced by the Lone Ranger. He did the right thing, but he wore a mask. So later on in my life, putting on a mask wasn't a big deal to me.
On the night of October 29th, 1964, Jack Murphy took everything he'd learned from the movies and from his prolific jewel-thieving days in Miami and set off with his friend and partner Alan Kuhn. He put on his mask and set in motion a heist so brazen that it would become the basis of a Hollywood motion picture just a few years later. For Jack and Alan, it was showtime. My name is Nate Scott. I'm a reporter and editor with For the Win and USA Today Sports. This is The Sneak. Last episode, we left off with Jack Murphy and his partner Alan Kuhn heading to New York, angry that they'd been duped by a socialite who, during a robbery, had given them a counterfeit diamond. While Jack and Alan did most of their work in Miami, the two weren't afraid to travel.
How many jobs do you think you and Alan pulled together before New York?
We had a couple of years of just a lot of fun, but it wasn't all Miami. I mean, somebody says, well, so-and-so in Cuernavaca, Mexico is holding, or somebody in Los Angeles needs a visitor. You just don't want to stay in one place, and because they know who you are and you heat it up, so travel in and out.
Jack and Alan were used to going out on the road to get a job done, so their trip to New York wasn't totally out of the ordinary. Though this time, they weren't the only ones on the adventure. They had another pal with them, Roger Clark.
Who was Roger Clark, and how did you get introduced to Roger?
Roger Clark was one of our buddies in Miami. He was one of dozens of guys that we're all friends and we all partied.
Both Roger Clark and Alan Kuhn have since passed away.
He was from Vermont, and we said, we're going up the coast and we're going to New York and we're going to do this. He said, well, I'm flying up. I'll come down and stay with you.
The crew was set. Jack Murphy, Alan Kuhn, and Roger Clark descended on New York. At first, they were content to party. The Yankees were in the World Series, and the jazz clubs and dance halls were hopping off. The three were young, handsome, and had money to burn. Then they got their eyes on something bigger.
We are touring all the different museums and art galleries and going to the fashion shows and all and eating in the fancy restaurants. And we go into the museum and we see all these jewels in there.
The museum was the Museum of Natural History. The jewels were the J.P. Morgan Gem Collection, which included the Star of India and the DeLong Ruby, two gems so large and flawless they couldn't be valued. They are two of the few things on Earth that can accurately be described as priceless.
So just automatically check it out. I check out the windows, check out the setting, where we're at, and what's the security like, and the doors are locked with chains and locks on the doors, and you just automatically check that out.
Jack says they hadn't decided to rob the gems yet. But thanks to his thief's instincts, he couldn't help but think about how he would do it. And he knew Alan was thinking exactly the same thing.
I'm a scientist that believes the tools of science are the way to understand the natural world, and one needs to be rigorous about that. But I'm also a believer in a personal God.
I'm in the Museum of Natural History in New York City.
I find the scientific worldview and the spiritual worldview to be entirely complementary, and I find it quite wonderful to be able to have both of those worldviews existing in my life in any given day because each illuminates the other.
The museum is located on Manhattan's Upper West Side, right up against Central Park.
One of the things that people sometimes say is that evolution is just a story about the past, so it doesn't affect my life today. Well, that simply isn't true.
The museum is massive and impressive. Even on a weekday morning, there are a lot of people around, school groups and such. It looks and feels like a normal museum, but as I've immersed myself in this case for the past month, I get a rush in here. I wonder, could I have done it? I move alone through the museum, imagining that I'm a cat burglar now, casing the joint, breaking down how I would make it happen, how I would slip in undetected, move gracefully, silently through its cavernous halls, then walk out with a priceless treasure. This fantasy lasts about 3 minutes, and then I realize that I'm totally and completely lost. I walk around for over half an hour looking for the Hall of Gems before I check the museum's website on my phone, and a tiny note I'd previously missed tells me that the hall is actually closed. My jewel thief career is off to an inauspicious start. Dejected, I find a tour guide to confirm this.
Yes,
The Hall of Gems is closed right now?
that's for a couple of years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. What they're going to do, they're not only refurbishing the hall, they're rebuilding the whole back of the museum.
Well, I was furious with myself for my lack of planning, and disappointed I wouldn't get to see the gems that Jack Murphy grabbed 56 years ago. The trip wasn't all for naught. I got to see the space, experience it. It's undeniable that the museum is a crossroads between the past and the present, a grand old time machine at the heart of one of the most modern cities on Earth.
I think it's 17 buildings. I mean, it's huge, you know. It's like 4 city blocks, I think.
That's Corey Kilgannon, a reporter for the New York Times who covers the city. He interviewed Jack in October 2019.
And, you know, and now the world knows that museum now, you know, partly because of the Night at the Museum movies with Ben Stiller. And, you know, one of the reasons those movies are so memorable is it's like the whole world brought into a museum. You know, you got history, you got dinosaurs, you know, you got nature, you got jewels.
Jack and Corey discussed, among other things, the technical aspects of the theft in great detail. They also talked about, as the kids say, the pregame. And that pregame routine before the heist, it really was a pregame.
I mean, he said he had a few beers in him, first of all. Like he went out, those guys went out beforehand, you know, whether it was kind of like a happy hour type of thing. They were shooting pool, they were drinking beer, and then they kind of drove past it and they had their reservations about doing it.
I don't care what we do, but Roger says, no, don't be messing with that stuff. He said, too many people know we're in town. He says, we'll go to jail.
It was too high profile, and there were people, you know, kind of knew they were in town and knew they were around. This wasn't the only thing they pulled off in New York City in those few weeks that they were up from Miami. You know, they pulled off other robberies.
Word was getting out about the handsome surf boys who were stealing things in and around New York City. And while Roger was nervous, Jack and Alan couldn't stop thinking about the J.P. Morgan gem collection. They'd scouted the place and thought they could do it. So, after a few drinks, Jack says they convinced Roger to just drive them up there, just to check things out.
He said, okay, we're just going to take a look. We're just going to go down there and take a look at it and just check it out, see what the schedule, the routine of the guards are. So Roger, our partner, I said, man, just drop us off. So he dropped us off. So we went and we climbed up the south side of the building.
And according to Jack at least, that was it. They were no longer checking things out. They were robbing the Museum of Natural History.
You know, you picture like these kind of like suave jewel thieves in the movies, if, you know, that kind of having that poise and that calm and like just them being all about the heist and not, you know, not your 2-bit, you know, stick a gun in the face and run away with with a bunch of, you know, wad of cash. I mean, this, you know, and these guys certainly weren't that.
We had an Irish airline bag with tools in it and all, and I had 125 feet of rope, and we went in and pulled off the robbery. But to do it, it was not an easy thing to do. Building is large bricks, like big old castle type thing, and there was a little tiny narrow ladder. Thing couldn't have been more than 5 inches wide, but we could make our way. So we make our way up to that to a ledge. So we have to go about 100 feet down this ledge, down this wing, and then we take a left, and now we are directly over the J.P. Morgan Gem Room. That side of the J.P. Morgan Gem Room had these large windows in it. Large windows that they kept open just so that there'd be an air ventilation in there.
The J.P. Morgan gem collection was so valuable it wasn't even able to be insured. And the museum had left the windows open.
We go in there, we go in the museum, and we're in there about 4 or 5 hours.
This is what sets Jack and Alan apart from your common smash and grab burglars. The guys got inside, right up to the gems, and then they waited.
The reason they had so much success with this thing was that they took their time. and they waited till the guard would, come and then go, and then they worked on these jewel cases in the thick glass.
The gems were in museum display cases and were separated by glass, so they methodically had to break each glass pane. Then they had to wait.
We would make some noise, then you gotta wait to see it. Did anybody hear anything? So you just you have a short time every hour to work.
Jack and Alan would smash the glass, then sweep up the shards to make sure no one could see anything. Over and over.
We'd clean it up. Alan would watch to see, here he comes. So the guy would come up and jiggle the locks on the cage there. And I was standing right there, right next to him. Because if anything went down, he belonged to me.
Luckily for Jack and the guards on duty that night, no one saw anything.
So anyway, we get through, we get the 3 stones. We get the midnight sapphire, the largest black sapphire in the world. It's actually black with a sort of purple center on it. Then you've got the DeLong ruby, which is the second largest star ruby in the world. And then you've got the Star of India, the largest sapphire in the world. And then in this flat case with all these stones, there were emeralds and diamonds and rubies and sapphires and aquamarine and topaz and all. And so I just cut a corner of that case out, and I had a large squeegee I found in the janitor's box, and I just reached in there and I squeegeed everything over there. So we got all of those.
Jack's eyes twinkle when he talks about stealing the DeLong ruby and the Star of India. This is one of those moments in his life he loves to talk about.
For Jack, this was the high point. He was in the newspapers, people were seeking him out.
That's Meryl Gordon, who wrote about Jack for Vanity Fair in 2014 for the 50th anniversary of the heist.
There was a glamour attached, and no one got hurt.
It was interesting to us that Meryl mentioned no one getting hurt. We heard that from several people who talked to us about this crime. They told us that part of the reason it got so much attention was the fact that there was no violence. And while that was true, Jack had told us something in Florida that complicated that a bit.
So you said the guard would have been yours. Were you guys armed?
Yeah. I didn't go to the bathroom or go surfing without a pistol. Not that time.
As Jack told it now, the men weren't just daring, suave cat burglars. They were armed. And as Jack put it, if a security guard came up, he belonged to me.
In all the accounts I read, I don't recall ever seeing mention of a gun that night. So again, I don't know, but I don't recall, anybody mentioning it.
Maybe it doesn't change the story for you, the fact that the men were armed. But for at least one of the reporters who has dug deep into the story, it did.
The hair on the back of my neck is sort of standing up at this moment.
That's Sal Bono, a senior reporter for Inside Edition and host of Inside Edition's New York Gritty series that ran a profile on Jack and the heist last year. He hadn't known the men were armed.
Now, again, only those 3 guys were in that room, and 2 out of the 3 have since passed away. But in the accounts that they gave prior to their passing, no one was armed. So to hear about this now, it doesn't make it an innocent story anymore.
Murph's story about actually exiting the museum was, I found, amazing.
That's Corey Kilgannon from the New York Times again. And he's right. Jack and Alan's escape, it was wild.
Come out and we're in this little park. And what it was, the police always went in pairs at that time of night in that area because you're right next to Central Park.
Jack and Alan walked out and saw the cops. They waited for a moment, but the police didn't seem to be looking for them. So they split up and made a plan to meet later.
I walk into the park, and as I'm walking through this little park, and I don't have about 100 feet to go through this little trail, and here comes 2 policemen.
There were 2 cops coming right towards him, and he just kind of straightened up and pretended he was talking to some guy walking his dog.
Whistled at the dog, and the dog, hey man, and I'm talking to the guy, and he's looking at me like I'm crazy. And, hey man, and the cops walk by, hey officer, yeah.
And these 2 cops walk right by him. He said hello to them, and here he has this kind of shoulder bag full of all these jewels, some of the most precious jewels in the world that he's, just stolen minutes earlier.
They'd made it. But Jack's night wasn't over.
I said, I'm going down to party a little bit because I figured, well, we're going to get busted.
He goes and hails a cab and goes down, not back to the hotel, not to reconvene with his buddies, but he goes down to some jazz club and, stands up to the bar, still holding the bag of jewels and, orders a drink and starts listening to the jazz.
And the thing was, at that time, you didn't care. What the hell? We'd done crazy, wild things, and It was just part of life. And we'd done things that we should have got busted on time and time again, and we walked through it and walked out of it.
Jack hit up a few more clubs, saw some music, then went back to his hotel, where he found something surprising.
Alan's sitting out on the curb when I walk up there. What are you doing? He said, I don't have a key. You don't have a key? We just robbed the museum and you don't have a key.
Alan Kuhn had just broken into the Museum of Natural History, but hadn't been able to break into his own hotel room.
So we go upstairs and we get in our room, shower, and I have my arm is all bandaged up here because I fell on that in the gravel earlier. So we clean up and I'm measuring the stones.
There was only one problem. The jewel scale they had was only built to measure jewels that were a few carats at most. It makes sense. Most diamonds you might find in a wedding ring weigh 2 carats or fewer. A massive diamond might be 3 or 4 carats. Why would you need more? So the guys jury-rigged a system using coins on one side as a counterweight and figured they could make a rough guess that way. This was how they got their measurement for the Star of India. 565 carats.
Okay, so I marked down, well, it is on the Kleenex, 565, Sapphire. Go wrap the thing up. Anyway, got all these jewels on the chair next to me, and there's a knock at the door. It's like 3 a.m. And it's Roger. And he came in and he says, how'd it go? I said, it didn't go. I said, they had dogs, and I said, we got stuck in the bushes. And so he's laughing. He said, I told you guys, you're wasting more time in this. And Alan came out and he took the towel. He says, what do you think of that? He said, Roger looked at it and said, well, I think we're going to jail. I said, yeah, so what? So the next morning, Alan and I left, and he takes this girl with him that he met there, Janet Flockowitz. Her name comes up in the reading a lot.
Janet Flockowitz lived in New York and started seeing Alan right before the crime occurred. Unwittingly, she became a major player in the heist.
The Getaway Driver, who was Roger Clark. Roger Clark drove to Connecticut to go visit family while Alan Dale Kuhn and Murph the Surf got on a plane and went to Miami the next day.
Again, this is Sal Bono.
With a girl that Alan had sort of had a thing with. You don't know if he was in love with her or was it a lust thing or if he was trying to find an innocent bystander to use and manipulate in order to help them. This innocent bystander, this woman named Janet Flockowitz, unknowingly mules the jewels to Miami.
So we go out to the airport, and I have a little overnight bag, a woman's overnight bag that was my girlfriend's. It was yellow with some flowers on it and all. So I told Janet, I said, would you carry this? It looks a little Nelly for me to be carrying this thing. It's got all the jewels in it and all, and I'm clean. And so anyway, we fly to Miami, and I get off, and I get off first, and I walk when my girlfriend meets me, and I step in the bar right here.
Jack was dating a woman at the time named Bonnie Lou Sutera.
I had taken her on some big robberies, just big mansions where I knew the people weren't there, and we'd been in the jacuzzis and the round beds, and we just took over, but she'd been in some adventures.
Jack told Bonnie about the heist, and she, Jack, and Alan got to celebrating.
That night, she and Alan and I were in the room, and these star stones, you roll them and you put a flashlight on a pin light, and when it gets in the right position, well, all the legs drop down, the white legs, they sort of explode.
The Star of India gets its name because it's a star sapphire. It's a gem that, when you shine light on it, displays what's called an asterism, which is a 6-rayed star that shimmers over the surface of the stone when it is moved. If you can look it up, by all means, do so. It's gorgeous.
We were rolling them across the board, pow, 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 but just having a great time. And the next day we did something. The newspapers came out with all of the headlines, and then the day after that, we're getting ready to go out in a boat and all, and the FBI kicked the door in, and it was showtime.
It hadn't taken long for the FBI to find Jack Murphy, but their attempts to recover the priceless gems would be a months-long ordeal, one in which lawmakers allegedly started playing as dirty as the crooks they were hunting. And in the movie of Jack's life, he finally took his starring turn, becoming a national folk hero in the process. But even all of this is still just the beginning of Jack's story. Once more, This is the voice of Sal Bono.
The heist is probably the least interesting thing in the story about the heist, which is crazy because it goes from being this innocent, fun, screwed up heist and story where, again, no one gets hurt to suddenly this savage and horrific thing. So yeah, when I found out that there was then later a murder, my stomach dropped because that's not where you expect these things to go.
That, however, is exactly where things went. The Sneak is a production of For the Win and USA Today. It is written and produced by myself, along with Anthony Pacillo. Our field recordist is Gustavo Moeller, and our music supervisor and audio engineer is Claire Morgan of Notterly. Researched by Emily Lacaze. Video and image work from Emmanuel Lozano and Alyssa Williams. Our executives are Mark Hyland, Scott Stein, and Kate Gutman. Special thanks to the USA Today podcast squad, Shannon Green and Claire Thornton, and the crew at Wondery, especially our marketing wizard, Alex Carpenter. Additional thanks to the investigative team at the Naples Daily News for their help with reporting, and the amazing team at Miami-Dade College's Wolfson Archives, who provided our archival footage.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, check out these other videos from USA Today to stay up to date with all the latest news.